Hi, Mom. I'm back. It's Sunday evening here, and I'm going to read you the rest of chapter 20. What was it? We're on the bottom chapter 27, bottom of page 205, the last paragraph. And then I will continue into chapter 28. Okay? So I hope you had a great weekend, and you're probably headed off to work with Peter right now. Uh, And I hope you have a good day together. All right. Love you. And I'm going to start reading now. Page 205, last paragraph. What a great example of a Christ-like life God has recently taken from us in the form of the blessed Pedro de Alcantara. The world is not yet ready to bear so much perfection. They say that times are changing and that our health is weaker than it used to be. This holy man lived in the present age, yet he carried the expansive spirit of the old days. He thoroughly trampled this world underfoot. Maybe there are not many people who are capable of performing such radical austerities as Father Pedro, but there are many ways to practice detachment. When the Lord detects sufficient courage in us, he teaches us the right way. And what exquisite courage God gave to this great saint I'm talking about. As we all know, Father Pedro performed rigorous penances for 47 years. I'd like to say something about his practices because I know it's all true. He told the Holy Maria Daza and me about these things because he hid nothing from us. The reason Father Pedro confided in me was because he loved me so much. As I have said before and will say again, the Lord desired to forge such love between this holy man and myself so that Father Pedro would always come when I needed him most, to encourage me and defend me. I think Father Pedro told me that for 40 years he slept only an hour and a half each night, and that at the beginning, conquering sleep was his most severe trial. Again, Mom, I question these practices. I don't know if that's the best way to. Well, anyway, who am I to say? But I think taking care of the body temple is really important, and one of the dictates that was taught to us in the Bible is to care for this body, and maybe through that we could actually be able to find God and serve each other better. But anyway, I'll continue to read. Sorry about that. I think Father Pedro told me that for 40 years he slept only an hour and a half each night, and that at the beginning, conquering sleep was his most severe trial. He practiced staying awake by always standing or being on his knees. Ouch. When he did sleep, he did so sitting up, with his head propped against a piece of wood he had nailed to the wall. It is well known that he could not have stretched out even if he had wanted to. His cell was only 4.5 feet long. No matter how hot the sun or how rainy the weather was during those years, Father Pedro never pulled up his hood or put on sandals. The only clothing he had was a coarse serge robe that he wore tight against his body with a short cloak made of the same material. He told me that he came up with a technique for fooling his body into thinking it was warm enough. When the weather was very cold, he would take off the cloak and leave the door and the small window of his cell open for a few minutes. Then he would close them and put his cloak back on. The contrast made him feel warm again. Understandable. He often ate only every 3 days. When I expressed my surprise, he said that these things were easy for anyone once you got used to them. One of his companions told me that Father Pedro once went without food for 8 days. He must have remained in a state of prayer the whole time. Father Pedro was known for his frequent transports of ecstatic love for God, one of which I witnessed personally. During his youth, Father Pedro engaged in extremes of poverty and renunciation. He told me he lived in a monastery for 3 years, and the only way he recognized any of the other monks was by the sound of their voices, because he never raised his eyes. He had no idea where anything was in the house. When he needed to go somewhere, he just followed the other brothers' feet. He used the same method when he traveled. For many years, he never looked at a woman. By the time I met Father Pedro, he said it did not matter whether he looked or did not look. All was one to him. But he was very old by this time. He was so frail that he resembled the knotted roots of a tree. Yet with all of his holiness, he was very amiable. Unless someone asked him a direct question, he did not say much, but he had a very lively mind, and he was delightful to talk to. There are so many more things I would say about this man, but I'm afraid that you will ask me what all this has to do with anything. I will conclude by saying that Father Pedro ended his life as he lived it, teaching and enlightening his followers. When he saw that he was dying, he recited this psalm: I rejoiced when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Then he fell to his knees and died. After Father Pedro's death, the Lord was pleased for him to guide me even more effectively than he had during his life. Father Pedro's teachings continue to show me the way. I have often seen him in radiant glory. The first time he appeared to me, he told me that the penance that earned him that glory was a blessed thing. A year before he died, when I was traveling many miles away from here, he appeared before me. I knew that his death was near and told him so. Then, as he was dying, he came to me and told me that he was going to his rest. I did not believe it, but mentioned it to a few people. A week later, the news came that Father Pedro had died, or to put it a better way, he had begun to live forever. Look how a life of harsh austerities ended in such great glory. I think he comforts me more now than when he was still on this earth. The Lord once told me that he would grant me anything I asked him in Father Pedro's name, and many of the prayers I have offered up in his name have been fulfilled. May the Lord be forever blessed. Amen. I certainly have gone on, haven't I? May what I have said serve to inspire you to let go of the things of this world, as if you did not already know about this and weren't already determined to abandon all attachment, and hadn't, in fact, already begun to put this renunciation into practice. I see such spiritual decline in this world that even if this writing accomplishes nothing more than tiring out the hand that wields the pen, I find it consoling. Everything I'm saying is directed against myself. May the Lord forgive me for offending him in this and any other matter, and may you pardon me too. I do not mean to weary you. It's as if I were asking you to do penance for my sins by making you read all of this. Well, maybe it is their penance. I don't know. Anyway, okay, so I'm not going to stop the video, Mom. I'm going to continue into chapter 28 called His Hands, and I'm just going to peek to see how long that one is. Not too bad. Okay. Let's get back to our subject. She's doing that a lot, isn't she? I lingered for quite a few days with this vision of Christ continually before me. It was doing me so much good that I was reluctant to come out of it even for a moment, and so I remained in a state of perpetual prayer. I took care of whatever business I had to attend to in such a way that it would not displease the one I love, who I now knew was witnessing everything I did. Although the barrage of warnings I received from others sometimes scared me, I could not sustain this fear in light of the tender assurances that came from my Lord. One day, while I was in prayer, the Lord decided to show me just his hands. I could never begin to describe such beauty. The vision shocked me. I am always frightened when God gives me a new supernatural favor. A few days before this, he showed me his divine face, and I was completely absorbed. Since the Lord would ultimately grant me the favor of seeing him whole, I wondered why he chose to reveal himself to me little by little. Later I understood that his majesty was giving me exactly as much as my delicate nature could handle. May he be forever blessed. Such a crude and lowly vessel as I was could never have contained such glory. The Lord in his mercy was preparing me to receive him fully. Why, you may ask, does it require such strength to see some hands and a face? Glorified bodies are so exquisite that a mere glimpse of such supernatural beauty leaves the soul dazzled and confused. At first, this vision stirred intense fear in me, but the agitation soon melted into a sense of calm, certainty, and peace. Then one day, his most sacred humanity appeared to me in his risen form, whole and radiant. It was the feast of St. Paul, and I was at Mass. He looked like he does in the paintings, beautiful and majestic, even though he was an imaginative vision. I did not see it with the eyes of my body, but only with the eyes of my soul. I recall that you insisted I write about this when it happened, and I obeyed, but it is very difficult to put into words without ruining it. I made the best description I could at the time, and I see no need to repeat it. I will only say that if there were nothing in heaven to delight our sight other than the exalted beauty of glorified bodies, this would be enough, especially the vision of the humanity of our Lord Jesus Christ. And if he sometimes reveals himself to us here on earth in proportion to our ability to bear such glory, can you imagine what it will be like when we are given that blessing to enjoy infinitely and for all eternity? Those who know more about theology than I do say that an intellectual vision is more perfect than an imaginary vision like this one, and an imaginative vision is more perfect than the kind of vision we see with the eyes of the body. This last kind, the corporal vision, is the kind in which the spirit of evil can most easily meddle and delude us. I did not understand these distinctions at the time Christ revealed himself to me in an imaginative form. I wanted to see him with my body's eyes so that my confessor would believe that I had not invented the whole thing. As soon as the vision passed, I wondered if I had imagined it. I was so concerned that I might have inadvertently deceived my confessor that it made me cry. I wished I had never mentioned it to him. So I went to him, and I tried to explain. "Have you intentionally deceived me?" he asked. "Or have you, in fact, simply described the vision as you saw it?" I told him the truth. I would never knowingly lie to you, not for anything in the world. He tried to calm me down. I know this very well. After that, I started to worry about having come to him with these speculations about deception. I don't know how the spirit of evil drove me to torment myself with the thought that I had made up the vision. But then the Lord bestowed the gift of this vision again, and made it abundantly clear to me that it was real. This truth quickly dispelled my doubts about my having imagined it. In fact, afterward, I could hardly believe I had ever wondered about it. How foolish of me! If I had spent 1,000 years trying, I would never even know how to begin, let alone succeed in imagining and conveying something so beautiful. In its luminous whiteness alone, it surpasses anything we can perceive here on earth. It isn't a dazzling radiance, it's a soft whiteness, an infused glow. It delights the eyes and never strains. The brilliant vision of divine beauty does not weary the eyes either. The brightness of the sun seems tarnished in comparison with this light. It makes you never want to open your eyes again after it has passed. It's like the difference between sparkling clear water flowing over a pristine crystal that shimmers in the sun and muddy, cloudy water oozing along the ground. This doesn't mean you perceive the sun or that the light resembles sunshine. In fact, the light of the vision seems like natural light, and sunshine seems artificial. It is a light that never gives way to darkness. Nothing disturbs it. Ultimately, it's ineffable. No matter how fine a mind a person may have, he could never come close to imagining the nature of this light, even if he tried all his life to understand it. God gives us this light so suddenly that we don't even have time to open our eyes. It doesn't even matter if our eyes are open or closed. When God chooses to give us this vision, we see it whether we want to or not. No distraction or resistance can fend it off. No effort or intention can make it happen. I have learned this through experience. I would like to say something about the way the Lord reveals himself in these visions. I will not presume to explain how it is that such a powerful light is put into the deepest part of the soul, or how such a vivid image is imprinted on the mind. This is a matter for men of learning to explicate. The Lord has not given me knowledge of how such things work. I was so ignorant and dull-witted anyway that no matter how hard these men try to explain the theological mechanisms behind the visions, I have trouble grasping them. It may appear to you that I have a sharp intellect, but I don't. Again and again I have discovered that I cannot understand a thing unless I am spoon-fed, as they say. Sometimes my spiritual directors have been astonished by my ignorance. To tell you the truth, I haven't really bothered to try understanding how God causes visions like this, even though I have had a great deal of contact with men of learning over the years and countless opportunities to ask questions about these. If I had a concern about whether or not something qualified as a sin, I would certainly bring it up, but I didn't feel compelled to analyze the rest. All I need to know All I needed to know was that God is in charge of everything. I saw that there was no reason to be afraid of this vision and that my only task was to give him thanks for it. Challenges only seemed to increase my devotional. All right, Mom. I was falling asleep there, so pardon me. You joined me on a little cat nap. I don't know how long that was, but I am tired. It's been a busy day. All right, mustering up here. I hope you catch a little cat nap there too. Um, Hopefully you checked the tracker to see that it was still moving and that you didn't accidentally pause it. But um, if I had a concern about whether or not something qualified as a sin, I would certainly bring it up. But I didn't feel compelled to analyze the rest. All I needed to know was that God is in charge of everything. I saw that there was no reason to be afraid of this vision or that my only task was to give him thanks for it. Challenges only seemed to increase my devotion. In fact, the more intense the difficulty is, the more my devotion flowers. All I can do is share what I have come to see through experience. You will be able to explain how the Lord works much more precisely than I can. You can clarify whatever remains obscure in my writing and articulate the things I didn't know how to say. What I know is that sometimes I would see an image, but in many other instances I did not. Instead, I perceived Christ himself. He identified himself with absolute clarity. Other times the vision was vague, like a painting rather than a living presence. But even this is a poor comparison, for paintings like this do not exist on earth, no matter how perfectly rendered they may be, and I have seen some excellent religious art. It's ridiculous to believe that this vision is any more like a painted image than a portrait can be equated with the man it represents. No matter how skillfully it is painted, a portrait will never look so lifelike that it can be mistaken for anything other than dead matter. As nicely as this metaphor functions, it's time to leave it behind. Actually, the example I just used is more like a comparison, since comparisons are never completely accurate. This is a literal truth. The difference between the vision of Christ and a painting of him is neither more nor less than the difference between a living man and his portrait. What we see in this vision may be an image, but it is a living image. It is not a dead man we are seeing, but the living Christ. He makes it clear that he is both man and God. He does not appear as he was in the tomb, but in his resurrected form after he left the tomb. Sometimes he comes with such majesty that no one could doubt that it is the Lord himself, especially after receiving communion, since our faith teaches us that he is truly present in this blessed sacrament. Then he reveals himself so clearly as the master of this dwelling that the soul seems to be utterly consumed in him. O my Jesus, who could ever describe the magnificence with which you reveal yourself? O Lord of the entire world and of the heavens, O Lord of 1,000 other worlds, of numberless worlds, O Lord of the heavens that you might yet create. Through the majesty with which you reveal yourself, the soul understands perfectly that it is nothing for you to rule supreme, over this earth. In this vision, I clearly see your power, my Jesus. All the spirits of evil are powerless by comparison. Whoever truly loves you easily tramples all hell underfoot. I suddenly understand why the devils were afraid of you when you descended into limbo. They must have wished they had 1,000 lower levels of hell into which to flee from such awesome splendor. I see that you want the soul to know how vast this glory is and to grasp the power that this most sacred humanity has when it is joined with absolute divinity. In this vision, the soul is given a glimpse of what it will be like on Judgment Day, when she beholds the sovereignty of this king and witnesses the righteousness with which he disciplines the wicked. Once she has had such a vision, the soul can no longer ignore her own wretchedness, and she is left with true humility. It triggers deep self-examination and inspires her to genuinely repent her transgressions. Even though the soul sees that this God is a God of love, she feels so naked and exposed that she doesn't know where to hide. She is completely consumed. I would go so far as to claim that when the Lord chooses to reveal himself in all his grandeur and majesty, the vision has such intense power that it would be impossible for any soul to bear it unless he gave her supernatural assistance. He puts her into an ecstatic rapture, and the vision of him dissolves into a pure enjoyment of his presence. Could it be true that the soul forgets the vision once it has passed? No, the majesty and beauty remain so deeply imprinted on the soul that they are unforgettable. Sometimes, however, the Lord wants the soul to endure a period of aridity and solitude during which he even seems to forget God. Other than these divinely ordained dry spells, the soul is fully transformed from this vision and lives in a permanent state of absorption. She enters into a higher level love, a new and living love for God. While an intellectual vision, that is, a vision in which the soul perceives God without form, is more perfect than an imaginative vision, a wondrous thing happens when the divine represents himself in our imagination. In proportion to our ability to withstand such glory, his presence lingers in our memory and perpetually occupies our thoughts. These two kinds of vision almost always come hand in hand. In an imaginative vision, we perceive the excellence, beauty, and glory of the most sacred humanity with the eyes of the soul. In an intellectual vision, we are given an understanding that God is God, that he is all-powerful and can do everything, that he commands all and governs all, that his love permeates all things. Such a vision should be cherished. In my opinion, it is immune from any contamination. From the effects of this vision, it is clear that the spirit of evil has no power here. I think the spirit of evil tried 3 or 4 times in the beginning of my spiritual path to masquerade as the Lord of love, but I didn't believe it. He takes the form of flesh, but he cannot even come close to representing the true glory of God. He tries to invalidate the true vision the soul has seen, but the soul spontaneously resists his efforts. She feels defenseless, restless, and nervous. She loses the devotion and delight she experienced when the vision came from God. She can't concentrate on prayer. The few times this happened to me early on, I knew something was wrong. Even if a person has only experienced a prayer of quiet, I think she will be able to deduce the difference between a false vision and a divine favor by their effects alone. It's obvious. I don't think the spirit of evil can deceive a soul who doesn't want to be deceived. If she walks in humility and simplicity, she will walk safely. Anyone who has had a true vision will almost immediately be able to discern a false one. Although the false one may begin with similar feelings of consolation and sweetness, the soul is repelled by it and has the urge to push it away. Even the sense of consolation is different. It isn't pure. It doesn't feel like sacred love. The spirit of evil is quickly unmasked. So in my opinion, he can do no real harm in an experienced soul. Could such a vision be the work of imagination? This is the most impossible of impossibles. It's utterly ridiculous to think it. The perfect beauty and pure luminescence of a single one of the beloved's hands completely transcends the imagination. How could we instantaneously see things that we have never even thought about, things so far beyond anything we can comprehend here on earth that we could never have begun to invent them with our imagination? Even if we could create these things in our minds, they would never carry the lasting effects of a true vision. In fact, they would have no effect at all. The soul would be left exhausted by the effort. Say we want to fall asleep, but sleep won't come, so we lie awake. I don't think that's my issue right now, huh, Mom? I am working at staying awake here to finish the chapter. Sometimes we need to sleep. We feel that heaviness in our head and the urge to doze off, so we lie down. When we can't fall asleep, we think that we must be doing ourselves some good by just resting in bed. But if it is not true sleep, it will not sustain or refresh our head. Instead, we will be even more tired than we were before we lay down. That's how a self-generated vision would make us feel. The soul would be left exhausted. Instead of being fortified and nourished, she would find herself drained and unsatisfied. I cannot overemphasize the richness of a true vision. It can even restore health and comfort to the body. When I was repeatedly accused of inventing my vision or being deceived by the devil, I offer this analogy as evidence of the validity of my experience. The Lord gave me other comparisons as well, but it was pointless. These men were very pious. Compared to them, I was a lost soul. These men were very pious. Compared to them, I was a lost soul. And because God was not leading them on this same path, my experience frightened them. Their own fear convinced them that what I was seeing must be results of my sins. I hardly spoke to anyone except my confessor, and a few people ordered me to tell about my experiences, but somehow my confidentiality was violated and my secrets were spread around. Look, I said to them once, if you were to tell me that a person I know well and had just finished talking was not who I thought he was and that I'd only imagined that he was, you can be assured that I would believe what you said and not what I saw. But, he went on, if this person leaves some jewels in my hand as a token of his great love, I would never believe you even if I wanted to, because where I was poor before, now I would find myself rich. I was trying to show them that these visions left jewels in my soul that changed me completely. Even my confessor admitted that I was transformed. The difference in me extended to every area of my life. I could not fake it. Everyone saw that it was real. Remember how wretched I was, I asked them. If the devil did this to deceive me and carry me off to hell, why would he do it by such uncharacteristic means as wiping away my vices and replacing them with virtues? Why would he fortify my spirit instead of weakening? Why would he change me for the better? I found out that my confessor used the same argument to defend me. Father Baltazar Alvarez was, as I said, a very holy Jesuit. He was a discreet man and exceedingly humble. As it turned out, his humility brought me great trials. Even though he was extremely learned and deeply prayerful, God did not lead him along the path I was on, so he didn't trust himself to guide me. Father Baltazar also suffered terrible trials on my behalf. People warned him to beware of me, and not to let the devil deceive him into believing anything I told him. They brought up examples of other people who had been deceived in this way. All of this worried me. It seemed like I was chasing everyone else, and that there would be no one left to hear my confession. All right, Mom, I'm falling asleep again. I'm going to try it because I've got 2 pages here. Thanks for napping with me again here. Even though I found that my confessor used the same argument to defend me. Father Balthazar Alvarez, as I said, was a very holy Jesuit. He was a discreet man and exceedingly humble. As it turned out, his humility brought me great trials. Even though he was extremely learned and deeply prayerful, God did not lead him along the path I was on, so he didn't trust himself to guide me. Father Baltazar also suffered terrible trials on my behalf. People warned him to beware of me and to not let the devil deceive him into believing anything I told him. They brought up examples of other people who had been deceived in this way. All of this worried me. It seemed like I was chasing everyone away and that there would be no one left to hear my confession. All I could do was weep. Thanks to divine providence, Father Baltazar chose to continue hearing my confession. He was such a great servant of God that he would have been willing to put up with anything for God's sake. He assured me that as long as I followed his advice and did not offend God, he would not give up on me. He always encouraged me and soothed my anxiety, and he insisted that I not withhold anything from him, and I never did. Even if my vision did come from the spirit of evil, Father Balthazar reminded me I would be safe as long as I told him everything. Then not only could the devil do me no harm, but the Lord would draw good out of the devil. This priest did his very best to perfect my soul. Since I lived with such trepidation, I strove to obey him, even though I did not always succeed. During the 3 years or so that Father Balthazar Okay, Mom, I'm doing it again. I don't know if I need to scrap this. I'm dragging out your reading time. All right, I'm gonna muscle through this here. Thanks to divine providence, Father Balthazar chose to continue hearing my confession. He was such a great servant of God that he would have been willing to put up with anything for God's sake. He assured me that as long as I followed his advice and did not offend God, he would not give up on me. He always encouraged me and soothed my anxiety. He insisted that I not withhold anything from him, and I never did. Even if my vision did come from the spirit of evil, Father Balthazar reminded me I would be safe as long as I told him everything. Then not only could the devil do me no harm, but the Lord would draw good out of the evil. This priest did his very best to perfect my soul. Since I lived with such trepidation, I strove to obey him, even though I did not always succeed. During the 3 years or so that Father Balthazar was my confessor, my trials caused him great suffering. I was persecuted terribly. The Lord allowed people to make very harsh judgments about me. They went to Father Balthazar with all of these issues, and he was often blamed for them. But he was innocent. If he had not been such a holy man, and the Lord had not supported him so much, he could never have endured such suffering. On the one hand, he had to deal with people who did not believe in him, people who were convinced that I was going to hell. On the other hand, he had to calm me down. Whenever God gave me a vision, the new experience would frighten me. Father Balthazar was determined to reassure me, but although he did what he could to dispel my fears, he sometimes accidentally intensified them. All these trials came to me because I was and still am a sinner. This priest was deeply compassionate and comforted me. If only he had trusted himself more, I would have suffered less. God showed him the truth in all things. I believe the same sanctity of his office enlightened him. I had many conversations with the religious men who were having doubts about me. I guess I must have spoken carelessly, because they completely misinterpreted my intentions. When I simply said exactly what was on my mind, they thought I was lacking in humility. This was particularly painful to me in the case of one of them, a man I loved very much. He was a profoundly holy person, and I was spiritually indebted to him. When I saw that even he did not understand me, I was crushed. I knew that he sincerely wished the Lord to light my path so that I would make real progress. Well, as I was saying, I spoke without reflecting on how it might come across, and this was interpreted as arrogance. Whenever they detected the slightest fault in me, and they saw many, they would condemn everything else out of hand. They would ask me things, and I would answer directly without analyzing myself. They thought I considered myself wiser than they were, and that I was presuming to teach them. They truly thought that they were doing what was best for me. They went to my confessor to inform him of my transgressions, and he would have to reprimand me again. This went on for quite some time. I felt like I was being attacked from every side. Only the favors the Lord was granting me enabled me to bear these trials. I'm telling you this so that you will realize what a terrible hardship it is not to have a guide who is familiar with this particular spiritual path. If the Beloved had not been blessing me as he was, I don't know what would have become of me. These troubles were enough to drive me out of my mind. Sometimes I found myself so beset by tribulations that all I could do was lift my eyes to the Lord. The notions of a group of powerful men against one little woman as weak and wicked as I was may not sound like such a problem when I describe it here, but believe me, this was one of the most severe trials I ever suffered in a life of several trials. May it please the Lord that I have been of some service to His Majesty by going through all this. I am totally convinced that the people who condemned me were serving God the best they knew how, and that all of this was ultimately for my greater good. All right, Mom. You made it through me falling asleep 3 times. Hopefully it was only three. I don't know. Maybe it was more. I'm gonna check the recording, see if I'm audible. Um, at any rate, I love you. Have a great day, and I will read to you soon and post again. All right. Good night.